Juletane by Myriam Warner Vieyra Wednesday, August the 23rd, 1961. 7 a.m. I open my shutters to the cool of a fleecy blue sky in the rainy season. The rain and the storm have soothed my long sleepless night, peopled with confused images of a former time, when I was full of hope. Then, I used to love those long, late nights, for sleep and dream would blend harmoniously into dawn. For years now, my mornings, a succession of long monotonous hours, have stretched out interminably. Today, however, I feel, I breathe, I am alive. A prayer comes to my mind. Thanku, Lord, for this new day, when I feel born again, from the bottom of my depths of solitude. I cry to you. Show me, I pray, the path of true liberty. Give peace to my soul. Teach me to forgive them. Make me an example of wisdom for this house. You have said, and I believe, that your wisdom is folly for men. The courtyard is deserted again for the moment, waiting for hour to appear. The clothes left on the line have been scattered by the wind, and form little piles of damp color. The only tree, a bushy mango, bare of fruit, with brilliant foliage, stretches its shade over our daily chores. I tidy my room, turn my mattress, shake out my sheets, crush a cockroach, sweep. I am overflowing with life and energy. Once more I pick up my notebook and the thread of my memories, while the household gradually stirs. We had dinner in a Chinese restaurant in the Boulevard Montparnasse. Then Mamadou and I went to the cinema. I would have liked to have seen one of the latest popular films. The billboards, in fact, displayed a giant Martine Carol with ample bosoms, or Gerard Philippe, my idol. Mamadou did not ask me to choose. A masterpiece of the 7th Japanese art was showing in a little neighborhood cinema and he absolutely had to see it. I have never understood what the film was about. The room was full. I couldn't read the subtitles. I was bored to death. Later on, rather than dark movie theaters, I preferred to stroll along the back Boule-Mich, or to chat with friends in a cafe. Sometimes on a Sunday we would spend the day with a couple, student friends of ours, at their house, where we met other friends. The conversation always revolved around the same subject, of prime importance. The future of Africa, independence. Some of them formulated bold plans, formed governments, assigned themselves ministerial portfolios, or an ambassadorship, preferably in Paris. A tiny minority, really just one man, thought that independence would be the ruin of Africa, would increase tribalism, and that the best solution would be control of their own resources within the framework of French laws and institutions. This was all too much theory for me. I knew nothing about my own homeland. At and after my father's death, I had left my island to go and live in Paris with my godmother, who took her role very seriously. Despite her meager resources, she tried hard to give me the kind of education which she thought would be worthy of my father's daughter. He was a wonderful man, she would say. He was perfect. My father, 20 years older than my mother, had married her after being a widower for many years. His first wife was one of godmother's sisters. She had been swept away by a tidal wave during a hurricane, clutching her 2 children in her arms. My godmother escaped, minus one buttock, sliced off by a sheet of zinc. I still wonder how the zinc seam could have been so accurate. Godmother was quieter than my mother. My mother was beautiful, young. She died at 19, right after I was born. My maternal grandmother took care of me until my father's death. Several years later, when I was sent to France. My godmother's wish was to fulfill the obligations she had undertaken on the day of my baptism. From then on I was almost completely cut off from my island home, and from other young people my age. Apart from going to school, I never went out, except with my godmother, most of the time to visit her friends, women who were all over 50. Once or twice a year, we went to a live concert. Pas de loop concerts. Godmother said that music was the most beautiful thing in the world. It was the only thing which could lift the soul to the untouched heights of the real joy of living. She wanted me to learn to play the violin. Unfortunately, I hated the teacher she chose, an old concert artist, decadent and slovenly. So, with a lot of tact, I managed to convince her that I preferred to remain the type of music lover who enjoys the art by listening to others play. On Sunday evenings we listened to broadcasts of Philharmonic Orchestra concerts from different European capitals. We lived in a small flat in Paris, 2 rooms and a kitchen. My godmother had spent her whole life working in a local tailoring establishment, which made custom-made suits. My dresses, which she made, had the same severity as the tailored suits she sewed all day long. Apart from music, all we talked about was the fashion world and its little bits of gossip. Having passed my brevet, a few days after I had started my first job, I came home to find godmother was not there. She was hardly ever late. She always arrived home at 5:30, doing her errands on the way. I waited half an hour, then set out to meet her. I walked 2 kilometers all the way to the workroom, which closed at 4:30. I retraced my steps, calling at the bakery and the butcher's where she generally shopped. No one had seen her that evening. I was seized with a sudden anguish. Suddenly felt all alone in a hostile world. I ran all the way home and rushed up the 6 flights of stairs. Her absence weighed heavily on me. I went back down to the concierge's flat to phone. The police station nearby told us that a black woman, answering to my godmother's description, had collapsed and died in the street. They had taken her body to the morgue. The next day, after a sleepless night, I went with the concierge and a friend to identify the body. It was godmother. As she worked very near to where she lived, she never carried her identification papers on her, so as not to destroy them or risk losing them. A month later, the concierge helped me to find a maid's room in the neighborhood. I gave up our 2-roomed flat and some of the furniture to one of our relatives. I realized some time afterwards that I had been cheated on the resale value of the furniture. That did not bother me unduly, because I had changed all my furniture. It would have been very difficult for me to continue to live in godmother's little apartment. Each object, each piece of furniture reminded me of her. One night I had woken thinking I heard her calling me. I thought I had seen the shape of a body in her bed next to mine. My life in the little maid's room was just like the one I had known with my godmother. I went to work, came straight home to lock myself in before dark. On Sundays I went to visit godmother's same friends, so that the break would not be too sudden. So until I met Mamadou I had lived very far indeed from any echo of the colonial world. Hence, independence or self-government were words which were quite new to me. Nevertheless, I quickly grasped and analyzed the facts. 6 months later, I felt perfectly at ease. Of course I was for independence, which was more in keeping with my headstrong character, while Mamadou, who was afraid of losing some of his made-in-France comforts, admitted he was a supporter of self-government. Outwardly he was pro-independence, but very lukewarm. Besides, he confessed to me that, if he got a good position, when he finished his studies, the political regime would matter little to him. The most virulent defender of independence, one of Mamadou's fellow students, who had seen his father forced to do degrading tasks, humiliated and struck by whites, was left with a hatred for whites which made him tremble with rage whenever he spoke about them. This, however, did not prevent him from tenderly clasping the waist of his white girlfriend. A very pretty blonde, her name was Martine. She had broken with her family, who did not want to associate with blacks, and lived, ecstatically happy, with her man. Perhaps in that way she hoped to obtain for her fellow countrymen, by her love, a pardon for their crimes. For a year Mamadou and I saw each other every weekend, and during the vacation as well as on holidays. Mamadou was not very forthcoming about our future or his feelings toward me. I know he was proud to go out with me. All his friends had adopted me, and openly complimented him on my good looks and my engaging manner. For my part, I loved him with all the ardor and intensity of a first and only love. In my eyes he was perfect. I had no relatives, few friends, so Mamadou became my whole world. During the week I did my work mechanically, waiting for Saturday with feverish impatience. One evening, to my surprise, Mamadou came to meet me as I left work, to tell me about his success. He had just obtained his law degree. ''I''ve got it. A few more months and I'll be going home. ''And what about me?" I asked, not concealing my distress very well. ''Why are you too? Naturally, you know you are very important to me. I'm always afraid to seem like a tarbab by talking about things like that. If it will reassure you, I have never told another woman that I loved her. I was overwhelmed with happiness. I opened my mouth, but no sound came out. I was living a wonderful dream. Mamadou loved me. He was taking me to live in his country, in Africa. After that, everything happened very quickly. We were married the first Saturday in September that year, only a few days before we took the boat for Africa. We took as much as we could with us, a whole set of household linen that my godmother had spent years collecting in preparation for my marriage. The most impressive part of our luggage was made up of all the gifts for relatives. Brothers, sisters, uncles, aunts, cousins, a number appeared at once, astonishing and magnificent to me. An only child, an orphan, besides. We had been at sea for 2 days. I was happy, very happy. After dinner, we went to see a girl, one of Mamadou's country women, who was returning home too, after completing her studies. As she did not travel well at sea, she had been in bed since our departure from Europe. I had met her in Paris, but she didn't belong to Mamadou's circle of friends, although she was from the same village. We had only ever exchanged greetings. She seemed antagonistic towards me, so I was not surprised at her behavior during our visit. She spoke in the language the whole time, ignoring me. Then, when we said goodbye, she said, this time in French, to Mamadou, "I hope you have bought gorgeous presents for our." If I were her, I would not have forgiven you. Mamadou did not answer. He was visibly embarrassed and preoccupied, which heightened my curiosity. Who was this Awa? I did not stop pestering him with questions. For the sake of peace and quiet, he finally confessed that, before leaving home to study in France, he had been married, as was the custom in his country, to a cousin, the eldest daughter of one of his mother's brothers, and that he had a 5-year-old daughter. The marriage was not really his doing. It had been arranged by the family. I was expecting anything, but not that. That Mamadou had had another woman before me, that was possible, but that he was already a husband and father, that I could not comprehend. Would I have been more shocked if he had confessed to being a thief, a criminal? I don't know. His admission devastated me, filled me with despair. I felt as if the world no longer existed, as if all life around me had suddenly stopped. Said nothing. My throat was tight. I was paralyzed by what I had just heard. Mamadou continued speaking. He spoke for a long time. I could not tell you what he said. I only heard a vague murmur. Was it his voice or the gushing of my blood as my heart beat violently? I thought I had found in Mamadou the family I must, so I did not love him only as a lover, a husband. I transferred to him all the filial affection which was overflowing in me as well. Once again, I felt the anguish of being an orphan, lost, alone, in the world. I was totally confused. When my father died, my godmother explained to me that Papa had gone to heaven, because God needed him, a good and just man. I accepted the idea, knowing nothing about death. My distress soon disappeared. When my godmother died, because of my youth, I was full of hope in the future. My life was a serene dawn. I had been working for only a few days. I was waiting for Prince Charming, so I patiently put up with my loneliness. But this time, the future I had dreamed about was being slowly transformed into a painful present. I had placed all my trust, all my love in this man, who was such a deplorable coward. It was not so much the fact that he had another wife that I resented, but that he had kept it from me. When I came to my senses, my mind was made up. As soon as I got to his country, I would leave Mamadou to his family and return to France. The rest of the journey was painful. This homecoming to Africa, the land of my forefathers, I had imagined it in 100 different ways, and it had become a nightmare. I no longer wondered how Mamadou's family would receive me. I knew I would be an intruder, out of place, lost. The other woman was with her daughter, surrounded by family who had chosen her, and who protected her. And I was there, absurdly alone to face them. I was the stranger. 10 a.m. hunger forces me to abandon my memories for a while. I cross the yard. Awa, on a piece of matting under the mango tree, is picking the rice. Diary is with her. The 2 other children are fighting over a mango with green flies on it. And Ada is nowhere to be seen. Is she still lolling in bed, or has she gone to hang about God knows where? From snatches of conversation, overheard beneath my window, it seems she spent a good deal of her time going to see men she knew who worked in government offices, to ask them for money. It is obvious that Mamadou's entire salary would not be adequate to support her following of griots, to pay for the quack marabouts, the jewels and the babas. What does she give in return? The kitchen is crowded with utensils. Some are even on the ground as there are not enough shelves. I help myself to a big cup of very hot ginkgo. There is no more bread. No bread. Was there any this morning? A ray of sunlight from the window casts a white band of light on one of the walls. It lights up a mixture of grime, smoke, finger marks, mosquitoes killed or caught in the filth. There are too many cobwebs to count on the ceiling. The cement covering the earth has long since lost its original hue. The sink is chipped. The tap, whose cock had been replaced by a nail, is closed by a skillful contraption of string. which doesn't prevent it from leaking. The price of just one of Ndeya's bulbs would have been enough to transform this kitchen into a very pleasant place. An intriguing cockroach crawls around my right foot, which remains motionless. Why should I kill it, when that would do nothing to diminish the number of its fellows? It grows more bold, climbs onto my foot, then off again and runs away. I want to scratch the sole of my foot, but I don't. Calmly sip the scalding liquid which goes down into my empty stomach and makes me feel good. Sense someone behind me. I turn around. It is Diary. She says nothing and goes away again. I know that Arwa has sent her to see what I was doing. Am I not mad in their eyes? It is natural. I am being watched. Annoyed, I lose all the feeling of serenity I had had in the morning, drop the cup and its contents, and go back to my room. I want to scream. Why this sudden anger? I tear a bigger hole in my sheet at a spot where it was not properly mended. I like the noise the fabric makes as it drips, so I carefully tear the sheet into tiny pieces. That keeps me busy, entertains me and calms my anger. At noon, the smell of rice and fish, which I have had to get used to, makes me feel hungry again. I come out of my room. Around the family bowl silence descends. Sit down, eat and go back to my room. Lie down and fall asleep, calmed. 4 p.m. I wake up sweating. The day is at its hottest. I go to the window to re-establish contact with the household. Arwa is plaiting Diary's hair. She is stretched out between her legs. I yawn, bored. I don't feel like writing for the moment. I take my strips of sheet and tear them diligently into tiny squares. How long did I spend doing that? My mind a complete blank. The volume of cloth torn up like that is impressive. I make a bundle by tying the 4 corners of the second sheet together, go out and scatter all of it over the yard. I am expecting cries, comments, and I sit at my window to enjoy the scene. Arwa opens her mouth, holding her jaw with one hand, the other on her hip. Her eyes meet mine. She says nothing. Her silence is eloquent, and she's no doubt thinking that I am getting worse. I burst out laughing and close my window. This evening, I am assailed by the saddest memories. My thoughts are frightful and confused. My night is a long nightmare, in which dream outlasts sleep and turns into obsession. Meanwhile, all around me, there is joy. It is the night of the Mawlid. Mamadou has gone to one of the holy cities to visit the Marabout with some friends. Ndeya, of course, has gone with him. Helene lit a cigarette, inhaled deeply and savoured the smoke which she blew out through her mouth, skillfully pursing her lips as she breathed it in again through her nostrils. It was a very harmful way to smoke, she knew. She allowed herself to drift, to get lost in rare reverie. She never took the time to dream, or even to just think about the past. She ordered her life watch in hand. She was very immersed in the present, and deliberately focused on the future. This evening, reading these lines, fragments of her own life came back to her, and forced her to make comparisons. Unlike the author of this diary, she had not had a lonely childhood. Her childhood had been happy. Her parents were still living. Being the last of a family of 12 children, too frail and sickly to work in the fields, her parents had sent her at 6 to the best school in the town, 8 kilometers from their village, a school run by nuns. They took children who were legitimate, baptized, and whose parents had a good reputation. In the classroom, the white children were in the front rows, then came the mulattoes, and finally, the last bench, at the very back of the class, was reserved for blacks. Helene's place was in the darkest corner, at the end, against the wall. 3 other little black girls shared the same bench. Their parents were important socially, so the nuns paid attention to them. Helene, a peasant's daughter, in her ill-fitting clothes, was left to herself in her corner. But that did not prevent her from learning as fast as the others, to read, write and count, to sing childish songs which delighted her father, because they were quite different from the secular tunes of the local village schools. At the time Helene did not understand a word of these songs, and today she was aware of just how feeble they were. One of them came back to her. When baby Jesus went to school, he carried his cross across his shoulders. When he knew his lessons, they would give him sweets. Helene saw herself once more during the last cane harvest, before she left for France for the first time. The villagers all gathered on one property to cut the cane. Helene's job was to bring drink for the men. She held a bottle of rum and a glass. Her sister Rosette, stronger than she was, carried an earthenware jar filled with water. They went from one cane cutter to another. Helene offered each man a glass of rum which was swallowed in a single draught. Then Rosette would give him a little water in half a calabash. The man rinsed his mouth and spat out the water. You could see the joy on each face, despite the sun. Sweat ran down the men's glistening muscles. Nobody seemed to feel fatigue, or the sharp edges of the cane leaves. T. Lewis, lucky fellow, the only one in the shade, made his drum talk, and from time to time he would shout a tune which was picked up by the others in unison. The women tied up the cane in bundles of about 6 pieces, then piled them up in heaps which were loaded onto ox carts. The carts left the village very early each morning, at 3 or 4 o'clock, so as to be among the first, when the factory opened to sell the cane. The difficult time was bath time in the evening. All the slices from the cane leaves felt like so many bites on which rum was being poured. That was the same year that Helene spent a wonderful day at the seaside. The whole family had set out with the birds in single file behind Aunt Sonia, and her huge pot of matautu crab balanced on her head. Mother brought up the rear with a demijohn of water. Her brothers, carrying slingshots, pretended to be big game hunters, asking everyone to lower their voices so as not to startle the game. Rosette carried the basket with the fruits, the bottle of rum and other little things. Helene remembered too the sweet smell of magnolia blossoms mingled with the bewitching scent of the frangipanias. She would amuse herself by making flower necklaces as she trotted along behind Rosette. After a good hour's walk they reached the beach. Helene was always impressed by this immense expanse of water. The day went by without anyone worrying about time passing. In the evening, on the way back, they walked more slowly, talked less, but the same contented joy shone in their eyes. There was a knock at the door. She checked to see who the visitor was through the peephole and opened it. Good evening, Helene. Saw your light. I was just passing. Hello Jacques. You are just in time to help. Are you really moving? You see, I'm getting ready. Oursman is coming back tomorrow, and we are getting married in 10 days. I've found a 3-roomed apartment in a little patch of green, outside the town. You'll come and see us often, won't you? I will. Forgive me, but I must tell you that I don't approve of your marriage to Oursman. You have always been a terrific girl. As an old friend, I am duty-bound to tell you what I think. Then you can do what you want. Oursman is very young. He is a good 10 years younger than you are. To be sure, you don't look your age. You are more attractive than a younger girl. He is dazzled by your physical, material and intellectual ease and confidence. But for how long? In 4 or 5 years, when your menopause begins with all its discomfort, when his ardor for you has cooled, he won't abandon you, but he will use your money to marry, and take care of a second, young, wife. You will only have 2 choices. To leave him, hurt and rejected, or to agree to share him. What then? Why you are funny when you play the part of the moralizing big brother. I think there is a third possibility. We may get along perfectly. And what about his family? You are a social worker. You know how clever mothers, sisters, and aunts are at bringing a new wife into a son's life. The prospect of your house being invaded by an army of nephews, nieces, and cousins doesn't put you off. My dear Jacques, you are very sweet. I am going to put you out all the same. Thank you for your kind words. If ever one day I should have the problems you've just described, I won't fail to come and cry on your shoulder. You are divorced? Let me have my own experience as far as marriage is concerned. Bye. Jacques went away, relieved at having performed a sacred duty. He was very fond of Helene, and wanted to keep her from being disillusioned. He believed Osman's feelings for her were sincere. He also knew from experience that with time and outside pressures Osman would not remain faithful to his commitment. In spite of Helene's optimistic nature, he felt very afraid for her. Helene closed the door after him somewhat nervously. She had gone over all the difficulties she could encounter, and the most important thing for her was the fact that, at 40, her desire to have a child could prove to be impossible. Osman cherished the same wish. Well, they would see. She banished these thoughts with a shrug, and went back to her reading.